There are a few games that I have always wanted to play, but for one reason or another, I haven't had the time or just didn't feel like it for some reason at that point, and I never played in the past. So I'm catching up with them whenever I can, and one of these games is Ubisoft's The Division. Now, The Division, when it was about to come out, looked like an awesome idea. It looked great in a trailer, and as we know with Ubisoft, they love to make trailers look gorgeous, and then the game looks nothing like in the trailer, is much worse. When I played it now, I can say that it definitely is clear to me why the player base is dwindling away, and I'm gonna start as always with the negatives. Now, the first thing that you'll notice is that the character creator is just terrible. There are very few options. Your guys actually look pretty much the same, and the same counts for the women. There's only one haircut for the women, which is somewhat longer hair, and it's actually just a ponytail, a short ponytail. I'm starting to get really pissed about this politically correct nonsense where now it is politically correct to make the female characters straight out ugly. They straight out make them ugly now, because the idea is now that ugly is absolutely okay and we shouldn't portray everyone as hot. That is nonsense. Games, movies, we are going in the realm of something that is way beyond reality. We're not supposed to actually look at it and think, oh yeah, that's me. I can recognize myself in it. I don't see the point of making the female characters unattractive. Ubisoft are really good at making ugly female characters. Another thing that I hate is a silent protagonist and your player character is not gonna talk. So that's something that immediately annoyed me, because they have crafted a somewhat interesting story, and it is so interesting because you could imagine this to happen. This does not sound impossible at all, and I would have loved for my character to actually have character and to actually speak and behave in a certain way so I can place him more, so I can know what I am. Silent protagonists to me are just being lazy. That's all there is to it. You are trying to save money, you're being lazy, and you're hurting the narrative. You can't have a protagonist who doesn't have a character of his own. It just feels weird. You craft this intricate world, you give me an interesting story, and this story could actually happen nowadays, and then I'm some mute person there who's just following orders from everyone. It doesn't sound right. He should have a character, and that's something that so many games still do wrong to this day. Another thing that I really dislike is the fact that you have various skills. You will throw stuff on the ground, you'll throw a turret, you'll throw a medkit on the ground, and it will stay and provide constant healing or shoot at your enemies, etc. And this stuff, when it expires, explodes like a fucking grenade. It explodes so loudly, it's crazy. And the worst part is that the game programs you to kind of pay attention to the sounds. Whenever you hear stuff, it draws your attention. After you've just defeated everyone and you're taking a breather, and then your turret expires somewhere behind you and explodes like a goddamn grenade, you think to yourself, the battle continues, I should be going behind cover. This was the same for my girlfriend Sarah, for the buddies with which I was playing. Everyone complained of it. We would oftentimes be like, oh man, was that your turret? It scared the hell out of me. And they'd be like, yeah, it's the same thing happened with me. I was also scared by my own turret. So that's something that is really stupid, and I don't get it, because you don't need to be notified about it. You're looking at your cooldowns because you want to use your cooldowns in an optimal way, and once the battle is over, I don't need the game to remind me that my turret now has disappeared. It doesn't matter anyway. Another thing that I don't like is the fact that mobs will respawn, and they will respawn just mid-battle sometimes, especially if you're somewhere in the dark zone or in the open world outside the dark zone. Just next to you, some dudes appear out of nowhere. You got like a 10 elites on you, killing you, and you can't even tell what's happening. You were fighting someone else. It's just really annoying when that happens, and it happens way too often. Of course, these are all MMORPG sicknesses, but this game has a bit of a identity crisis because it feels different from an actual MMORPG as we know them. It doesn't feel like a game similar to Guild Wars or something like World of Warcraft or anything like that. It feels more tactical. It's a Tom Clancy game, and this totally feels out of place. I might be wrong for being angry about that, but that's something that annoys me to this day. I feel like this game could have been so much better if it had been something akin to Borderlands. I feel like it should have not been an MMORPG and would have done better. But okay, that's what we're having, so that's what we're dealing with. Another really huge problem are bugs. As every MMORPG, it has an intricate world, so obviously it's gonna have a lot of quests and stuff to do, and there are a lot of bugs, and some of them are straight out mission breaking bugs, and I'm talking main missions. So there was this one mission where at some point you have to reach a certain part, disable an electrical grid, so that later on two really powerful turrets that basically insta-kill you can be disabled and you can run past them. You have no other choice. And what happens is we go there, we disable it, we go upstairs and we fight. The turrets are off, everything as it should be, and then we die, we wipe, and we respawn at that part with the turrets. Only this time the turrets for some reason are active. They're shooting at us and there's no way to go back to disable them again. So now we're literally facing these immortal turrets that are one-shotting us, and it's an absolute absolute nightmare. It took us about 45 minutes to cheese through them. We basically had to charge in a certain order, so the turrets would kill the first 2 guys and the third guy will manage to pass in the meantime as fast as possible, and through this be able to reach the next objective by just sprinting. And this also failed because there were other mobs that appeared behind him and we had to do some crazy stuff. It was awful. That was definitely not what I would imagine under fun, and I was just sitting there wondering, how could this get through? This is an old game now. This game's existed for so long. Why is this happening? On another part, their mission was just to go into another zone, and we would use the door and the door would open. We would go on the other side, but it wouldn't load the level. I'd be locked in there. It's like a fence and stuff. There's nothing. It should load a new zone, but that just didn't happen. And we had to read online how to fix this. Apparently it's relatively common, so there are people who had this and there are ways to do it. I'm not gonna go into too many details, but it's just crazy that this would happen in this game. The description of things can be really idiotic. Some names, some things. It goes so far that it's in kind of bad English. It's an Ubisoft game. It's a AAA title, and it just felt, again, pulling me completely out of the immersion, and just weird that they would have these typos and errors inside. It's absolutely ridiculous. Then you would go on and you would realize that after you beat the game, you suddenly have a new mission appear, and you go to do this mission and you do the first part, and the mission is really super challenging. Ultimately very hard, makes you play with your friends really well because you're still under geared, and the mission is really tough. You manage to pass this first part, and it's actually a story mission. It tells you about some interesting stuff, and suddenly it tells you, okay, go to this place now, and you go there and you enter, and suddenly the game says, oh, you need a DLC for this. You can't enter here. Only people with the DLC can. So the game is baiting you into buying a DLC. That's something, again, that I just cannot stand. You know, if you're gonna offer me a DLC, offer me a DLC where I pay, I have content, but don't give me half of the content now, leave me hanging in the middle with story stuff and be like, oh yeah, please go and pay. Well, what if I don't want to buy your DLC? What if your game is almost dead and very few people are playing it? It's more like a curiosity now that I'm trying, and I'm trying to see, was it really worth playing? And then you bait me in this way. You're not helping your case. Of course I'm not gonna buy DLC. This game is not worth it at all. It was fun to some extent, but this was just ridiculous. Another thing is that the player base, like I said, is very low. Try to find people to do instances and stuff. Try to find people to level up with if you don't have friends with whom you have agreed upon playing this game. You're gonna have a bad time. We waited for very long just to enter an instance because it offers you to set difficulty and stuff before you enter and try to do a story mission, for example, and you can wait for people to join. We waited once for 15 to 20 minutes and only one guy appeared, and that was it. Nobody was coming. Another thing that I really dislike, you have this situation where the dark zone, this quarantine zone, which is like a PvP PvE zone but mostly PvP, even there we would usually not find that many people. In the normal zones, if you want to play with someone, they actually have to be in your group. When you enter a safe house, you see a bunch of people in there, and then you exit the safe house, the streets are dead, and that just doesn't feel like an MMORPG at all because you don't interact with other human beings. The only way for you to do it if you don't have friends on the ready is to get into a safe house, try to talk to these people, and unfortunately the community is as antisocial as I have seen. 99% of the cases they never reply whether you speak or write. It's very difficult to find some people, and then you find some nice people and they are way too experienced at the game. You feel like they're guiding you. You feel useless with these people. You can't find any noobs like yourself to play with. That's my problem. Everyone's making new characters. It feels like as the community is getting smaller, the ones that remain are only the hardcore players who are just rehashing, making new characters and just going over and over again. And that's nice, but at the same time it would be great if it had a healthy amount of noobs as well, so that you can make groups with them. That's not the case anymore. You have very few enemy types, meaning that you're gonna see certain amount of enemy types. You have a few factions and that's pretty much it. There are very few enemy types, and obviously there isn't much here that could happen. I mean, you're gonna be fighting people, it makes sense. I understand that, but at the same time I wish they could have thought of something else. We have also conflicting ideas, and this is where I said earlier that the game has an identity crisis. It doesn't know what it wants to be. It wants to be tactical on one end. You have cover and you got lots of statistics and weapons and skills, and you can have good synergy and play better with friends, but then at the same time it wants to be an MMO and gives you one guy and he takes 10 grenades to the face and he hasn't lost even 10% of his HP. It just feels weird. You get this critical point where, for example, you shoot people in the head, but it doesn't feel satisfying enough. It doesn't do enough. I mean, I have the heaviest sniper in the game. I shoot the enemy NPC in the head for maybe 3 clips and he doesn't drop. Ubisoft, of course, has done their thing where they cover the map in markers with all kinds of repetitive, tiny, super lame tasks that you have to do, and it's always the same rehashed, and you always go from task to task following marker to marker. And I'm a person who doesn't have that much of a problem with it usually in games, but in this game it started to get tedious because in most of their games you have objectives that are tied to some kind of crafting system. That crafting here is absolute crap. Apparently it used to be better, now the results are absolutely useless. There are some recipes in the end game part, but I never reached that because I got way too bored. I did reach the max level, I did gear up, but not as much as some people. So still the crafting is just not very useful. You just need to open the internet and read about it, and you'll see how people are complaining now, because you can craft multiple times and get different stats on the same weapon. It's not certain, and they have increased the costs of crafting apparently and decreased the quality of the results significantly. But the funny thing is that all the guys who did it before now have the super strong versions of everything, and all the new guys get the super weak ones. And this is getting us exactly to the next point, which is balance. You see, the dark zone is the place to be if you want to feel more of the game actually later on, and this is where the PvP happens with the rogue agents, and this is where all the people are who are much better geared than everyone else and kill you in one shot while you pump them up like crazy and nothing happens to them. It is ridiculous, it is frustrating, and it's unfair. But that's not all. Unfortunately, the game is also plagued by cheaters. As small as the player base may be at this point, there's still lots of people using all kinds of trainers, giving them the ability to aim at you straight in the head with aimbots, shoot you through walls, kill you at any distance with one shot. It's ridiculous. This happened like twice, and I don't even get why. Like, what are they gaining from this? The game is dead already. But okay, I've been crapping on this game for 15 minutes now, so I'm gonna say a few good things because it's not all bad. In all fairness, there are lots of lore collectibles, and while this is yet another repeatable mission, it tells interesting stories. There are recordings, there are these echoes which basically show you part of the backstory, and I find this very interesting because I'm a narrative kind of guy. I like a good story and I can follow it and enjoy doing so. The Dark Zone itself has a really cool feel to it and just is very interesting. It's more difficult, and I honestly wish sometimes that there was no PvP in the game whatsoever. I would have probably preferred it. We still spend many hours in the Dark Zone because the whole thing with extracting your goods and stuff is very interesting, but there are downsides to that as mentioned. There are lots of details throughout the world. They put a lot of love in this. I gotta give them that. For example, you'll see a car with open door. If you go close to it, you push the door. There are dogs doing different stuff. There are people arguing on the street, you know, having conversations and stuff. That is a well-crafted world. That's why I'm so disappointed, because there's so much potential here. Another thing that I love is that the game drops generously. You get a lot of stuff, and oftentimes you'll get nicer drops, especially at higher difficulty levels later. The game does reward you, but while this is a plus, I must say sadly that it's also its undoing. Because what happened by the end of my time playing is I found a couple. So it was me and my girlfriend, and we found a couple, another guy and his girlfriend, and they had like 3 different characters that they had maxed out, and this was like a new character they're developing each. And they took us to some instance with their powerful characters. They would increase the difficulty to the maximum level. We'd just be tagging along. We couldn't even damage the mobs. That's how strong they were. And these guys would mow them down. The drops would be insane. And within just maybe like 2 hours, we were geared up. Our stats increased 100-fold. I'm not even exaggerating. And this is, as I said, partially the undoing of the game, because we got most of the stuff that we could have gotten from instances at that point. The rest was really hardcore grinding, hardcore Dark Zone. The rest is just not so much fun. And don't get me wrong now, we were pretty much done with the game at that point. So we did it knowing what's gonna happen, and it's not like this ruined the game for us. So we already were about to stop playing. We had put enough hours into the game. It was fun while it lasted, but at this point there was nothing left, and we just wanted to see what the difference will be when we have this nice gear. And it was nice, but like I said, it didn't do anything. But I can imagine some people could do this. It seems like a common practice from what I was told, and then they'd suddenly be geared up and they would wonder what to do next. Just nothing left to do except grind, and that doesn't seem so much fun, or PvP, and that seems even less fun. Something that I noticed, that some covers, for example, take damage and even chip off and break down. Again, attention to detail, really nice stuff. It's a beautiful game. The world is realistic. I would have loved to sink my teeth into it further and spend many more hours if the game had the content to offer, more balance, and just some of these issues at least didn't exist. Unfortunately, that is the case. And ultimately, I gotta say that the game was a lot of fun in small bursts. At some point, it was too much. It definitely does not add up as an MMORPG. It doesn't really do well as an RPG together as well, but it was fun, and therefore I would recommend it to people. I think it's a great game if you play in short bursts, and if you just to level up and do the PvE, I would not advise you to play the PvP. It's much cheaper now than it used to be back in the day, and it's worth taking a look because it's such an oddity before the servers are dead and empty. But other than that, I don't really think that if you're looking for a proper MMORPG, you'd be happy here. So that's that's my recommendation. If you want to play some action with RPG elements and don't want to spend way too much, as you would spend in a real MMORPG, which is what I expected more or less, then go for this. Otherwise, skip it. Thanks for watching and have a great day.